Got your energy story for this, the first week of March 2026. Well, last week, Xcel Energy announced a deal to supply a new Google data center in Pine Island, Minnesota with renewable energy. The utility said it was committed to ensuring that new large loads do not negatively affect other ratepayers and that this arrangement would reflect that commitment. To make it happen, Xcel will serve Google under a clean energy accelerator charge similar to the tariff arrangement under which Nevada's NV Energy will deliver 115 megawatts of clean, enhanced geothermal power to Google in that state. In this case, the CEAC will result in development of 1,400 megawatts of wind and 200 megawatts of solar. It also provides for a $50 million investment towards Xcel's Capacity Connect program, which is a unique effort developed jointly with DER provider Spark Fund, in which it will develop and own up to 200 megawatts of distributed storage assets strategically placed across its service territory at local commercial, industrial, and institutional sites. Each of these sites will include batteries providing between 1 and 3 megawatts of storage if regulators approve. Storage. That's the last piece of this initial huge Google deal. To support its wind and solar and firm up the energy they produce, the project also includes something the world has never seen before: 300 megawatts of iron-air batteries to be manufactured by Form Energy, boasting 100 hours of duration, putting that project at 30,000 megawatts of storage. Let's put that in perspective. In 2025, per the just-released Solar Energy Industries Association and Benchmark Minerals Quarterly Battery Report, the U.S. installed over 57 gigawatt hours and 28 gigawatts of nameplate capacity. Two things stand out in the comparison here. First, the average duration of batteries installed last year across the U.S. was about 2 hours. So this single project with Google's, the duration will be 50 times the U.S. average. Second, and most impressive, this single project represents a little over 50% of the entire battery energy storage installed across the country last year in terms of gigawatt hours. And that is simply phenomenal. Form Energy CEO Matteo Jaramillo left Tesla years ago, and he set up a team at Form in 2017 to create longer duration storage. And after exploring many materials, he settled on iron, which, when it oxidizes, a pretty cool word for rusting, releases energy. Iron's abundant and it's cheap. So the company set about testing and validating, and it was a long time coming. In 2020, I was excited to see Form announce a 1 megawatt, 150 megawatt hour project announced with Great River Energy in Minnesota, because it felt like there was a there. That project got drawn out, although construction has now begun in Cambridge, Minnesota, with the project now at 1.5 megawatts and 150 megawatt hours, as Form eventually settled on a 100-hour duration as its sweet spot. The company subsequently signed two 10 megawatt, 1,000 megawatt hour deals with Xcel for Minnesota and Colorado, a 15 megawatt, 1,500 megawatt deal with Georgia Power, and a 5 megawatt, 500 megawatt deal with the California Energy Commission. It looked to be on its way, but it still needed a factory, and to prove it could actually manufacture product. Form bought and rehabbed an old steel mill in Wareton, West Virginia, with a plan to create annual output of 500 megawatts when the factory was fully built out. So this Google deal will represent 60% of that capacity. One of the biggest questions, in addition to the company's ability to manufacture a reliable product, which is now proven to excel after manufacturing something on the order of 100,000 electrodes, the anodes and the cathodes, meaning it's run 60 miles of electrode materials through the plant. The other question, though, was whether the market would be able to embrace a new battery technology with one significant drawback. Unlike lithium-ion batteries that typically operate at 90% round-trip efficiencies, losing 10% of their energy during each cycle, or pumped hydro that often sits in the mid-70% RTE range, Form has an abysmal 40% RTE. Neil Young once sang that rust never sleeps, and perhaps it doesn't, but it doesn't appear too energetic in this case either, losing 60% of the energy every time it cycles. Nonetheless, 100 hours of duration, if it can be delivered reliably and at low cost and in enormous quantities, has the potential to be a game changer in today's so-called energy transition that relies greatly on variable wind and solar to decarbonize our grids. 100 hours gets one to dispatchability and firm capacity that the grid sorely needs in its quest to address the critical issue of resource adequacy, especially with the apparently insatiable demand of new data centers. Part of my job as an author, keynoter, and educator is to look at the technologies of tomorrow and speculate where they might take us. Given that role, I've been excited about Form Energy for some time. And in 2024, I began including a slide showing Form Energy in my keynotes and workshops related to resource adequacy and data center loads, talking about how they might serve data centers. I even had some conversations with members of the Form team where they diplomatically indicated that data load was of great interest. But then, even as forecasted data load soared, there were crickets from the company, and I began to feel that perhaps I was over the tips of my skis on this one, speculating about something that would eventually prove to have no substance. Most of the time, I guess right, but I was beginning to feel some unease on this one. So it was with some relief when I read the announcements from XL, Google, and Form last week. Now the critical questions, in the face of this enormous new electricity demand and a growing need to firm up renewables, are whether Form Energy can deliver to the broader market at an attractive price point, and whether it can scale to the gigawatts of capacity and hundreds of gigawatt hours of energy storage needed in the grid in the very near future. In the meantime, I'm brimming with gratitude on the news of this deal, as at least for this week, it's kept me from looking like a fool. Well, thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon.